637, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. So many questions, so little answers so far. The question is, will we get those answers? Now, Cathy Hinners going to be joining us in a second. I want to play a couple of real quick audio bites, then get Cathy's perspective. Bizarrely, as the New Orleans terror attack continued to unfold, the investigation unfold, bizarrely, the FBI initially said that this was not a terror attack, which I thought was very strange.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is they're improvised explosive devices.
I don't really get that, because they literally knew that there was an ISIS flag that was on the dude's truck. So why it is that she came out and she said that it was not a terrorist attack, I don't really know. But then Senator John Kennedy out of Louisiana, he was part of another press conference, and he is demanding transparency. Now, I think that most of us here on WTN, if you know anything about me, you know anything about what the FBI and the intelligence agencies have been up to over the last couple of years, you know that they have been far from transparent. You also know that their priorities have been way mixed up. And in my opinion, there's a lot of folks at the FBI that they're not necessarily focused on combating radical Islamic terrorism, and what they're really focused on, and what they have been focused on, things like DEI, and also, of course, January 6th. And neither of those two things can keep us safe. And so John Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, he was part of this press conference, and he had a warning for the FBI.
Here's what I want to ask from the federal government. Catch these people. Catch these people. And then tell the American people the truth. Now, I don't want you to tell us yet anything that's going to interfere with your investigation. And there are things that I've been told that I think are true that I'm not sharing with you today, because it could interfere with their investigation. But after we get to the bottom of this, they need to tell the American people the truth, and the people in New Orleans the truth, and the people of America the truth. I think the mayor and the governor are very wise to postpone this ball game for 24 hours. There's just too much stuff we don't know, and it's just not worth it. But I guess my final point is, I will promise you this: I will, when it is appropriate and this investigation is complete, you will find out what happened and who was responsible. Or I will raise fresh hell. And I will chase those in the federal government who are responsible for telling us what happened, like they stole Christmas.
So that is Senator John Kennedy out of Louisiana, and we've got Cathy Hinners on the line. 20 years as a police officer in New York. And of course, if you know Cathy's work at dailyrollcall.com, she is very well versed on radical Islamic terrorism, radicalization as well. Cathy, as always, appreciate you joining us. And let me just ask you a couple of real quick questions. I know we probably don't want to dwell on this, but it was stunning to me that that this Jabbar was able to get that pickup truck around the police cars and maneuver around it so that he could get down that road and run over all of those people. And I guess the question is, when you looked at that, were you surprised at the fact that this street clearly wasn't safe?
I wasn't. I mean, they had a police car, and that's not unusual to have police cars used as barriers. But I believe he probably took some rides around there previously to see what the situation was going to be. Obviously, those barriers had been down for a period of time because they were malfunctioning. But you know what? Those barriers are made of steel. They probably would have stopped him, but he was determined, and anybody who's determined is going to follow through. So going up on the sidewalk was the next easiest thing for him to do. And so it doesn't surprise me that he was able to do that. If he was smart, he would have been to that area. He picked that area for a reason, so that's why I believe he had been there prior to doing this. So the barrier is a big issue, but it is what it is. They were taken down for a reason, but it still was a soft target. I mean, we can't stop. He had IED on him, so if he was going to kill people, he would have gotten out of the truck and blown himself up in front of, massive amount of people. So he was determined, and killers will do what they have to do to kill.
All right, let's talk about how he became radicalized. So I don't think we know exactly how he became radicalized. Apparently he was part of this mosque, and I don't know if you saw in the news today, Cathy, but folks within that mosque, some are reporting that the people from the mosque are being told not to speak to the media, perhaps not to cooperate with the investigation. So, I mean, I don't know. Does that come as a surprise? It does not come as a surprise to me. I don't know anything about this mosque, but I know that he lived in this trailer park that was mostly Muslim immigrants, and he was born in America. He was in the military for years. He was a real estate agent. He actually put out a video talking about how, he could do great things if you list your home with him and so forth. And so somewhere along the line, he became radicalized.
Well, he was a convert. We know that he grew up Christian, according to his brother. So this is where converts tend to be a little bit different than people who are born into the religion of Islam. The mosque itself is called Masjid Bilal. What's interesting about this, and many people might not get this connection, but it's owned and run by the Islamic Society of Greater Houston. They are owned by what's called the North American Islamic Trust, which is the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, people hear the word the Muslim Brotherhood all the time. They have been designated a terrorist organization in most Middle Eastern countries. The United States has not designated them for a lot of different reasons yet. I believe that Trump will probably wish to do that, which he needs to do, and that will get rid of a lot of these organizations, even Hamas, that is here in the United States. So there is that connection. I am not surprised. We're trying to find a connection between one of our imams that we know is radical, Yasser Qadi out of Memphis. He is in Texas. I'm looking to find out now if he had anything to do with this particular mosque. The radicalization part, without getting into the doctrine, you look back at what ISIS believes. ISIS believes that the global caliphate must return. That is where Islam will dominate, and Sharia law, which is classic Islamic law, will be dominant within all countries. If you start looking at what's happening over in Europe, especially Germany, even Britain, what's happening there now obviously is starting to happen here, and it's just the influx and the growth of Muslims that are, and I can't say radical because the true Islam is radical. I mean, he wasn't radicalized by ISIS. He was radicalized by Islam and what he learned in that mosque. And that's the difference. I think people aren't paying attention to things that we should be paying attention to, like who's teaching him. And it goes the same with the bomb. Who taught him how to make that bomb? And that's where they'll find out who actually he's associated with. He wasn't a true bomb maker. He had to learn from a bomb maker, and there's signatures to those bombs. So that will reveal who he's related to and who he learned from. But there's so many other things when you start talking about the flag and everything. Most of those flags contain what's called the Shahada. The Shahada is the first pillar of Islam. It is, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the prophet. That's what they truly believe. So that is what is displayed on Al-Qaeda's flag, on the ISIS flag, and on most of their flags. It'll have, if not the whole thing, there is no God but Allah. That is what they believe. So that's the part that, again, starts to radicalize. And when he probably started attending this mosque, he was kind of in financial trouble. He had gone through divorces, and the promise is to be a good Muslim, you will obtain paradise. And that begins to be the goal and the pressure that they face. He might have also been chastised for being an American soldier. That is a big no-no to a lot of these mosques. A lot of these imams will tell them, you're not supposed to follow any other law but, Sharia law or Allah's law. And so fighting against what he did, fight against Middle Easterners and Muslims, is against Sharia law. So he might have been chastised, he might have been ostracized, but whatever it was that led him to do this obviously came from the mosque. I think the mosque is going to be the key, actually.
So, all right, Cathy, hold on one sec. I got to jump the traffic. Got a couple more questions for you. Cathy Hinners joining us on Nashville's Morning News. It is 6:46. Time to check the roads on WTN. As far as your weather today, high of 45, and right now cold in 26. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Cathy Hinners joining us. All right, so Cathy, a couple of things. Obviously, this guy had a lot of problems, the New Orleans attacker. And I think part of what I think is going on here is you and I have spoken before about radicalization, rapid radicalization. 4 years ago, as early as 4 years ago, this guy was, trying to sell real estate, and he had what seems to me like a military career that I don't know if he was discharged appropriately or if something happened. I don't know about his military career, but how worried are you that there's a whole bunch of these guys that are out there and they've been radicalized one way or another? You and I have spoken about before about the wide open southern border. That's where everybody is going. And one of the things that some are saying, Cathy, is that, well, don't forget that this guy was born here in America. He did not come across the wide open border. So you conservatives need to shut up about that. Well, the reality is that we know that people that are connected or affiliated with ISIS have come across our southern border. And so is there a possibility that those folks that came across our border are finding people that sort of are disengaged and they're helping in this radicalization?
That's exactly right. But also in addition to that, and where they need to shut up, is when the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan occurred back in 2021, there were hundreds that came into this country that were not vetted. 600 of those were deemed to go to Nashville, Tennessee. Go figure that. And we don't know that they were properly vetted at all. One report says they weren't, and then you have other reports that say they were. The vetting process takes a long time. You and I have gone over that before a few years ago. The vetting process is not just something that takes a day or a week. It can take a couple of years for these people to get properly vetted, especially if they're from countries that don't have, fingerprints and birth certificates and things like that. But we do know that 600 Afghanis landed and were supposed to come into Nashville. Whether or not they've stayed in Nashville, whether or not their ideology is in line with, some of the mosques, we don't know that. But, here they are. They're in our state. They're in our country. So, and I would say, without putting an official number, the amount of them that have come into the country, I would say there's thousands. And I would say, as far as ISIS, there are known cells in every state, whether it's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, any of these. They're in every state, and we've known that. And I think Christopher Wray maybe is starting to tell the truth a little bit about, this threat has escalated. This threat is going to continue to escalate. So I think we need to start paying attention to more of the doctrines of which these guys are learning from, and stop worrying about, offending people and saying, well, it's a religion. It's a political way of life. It's a true way of life. And if they're following the Prophet Muhammad, you get it. And so without, getting further into that,
right.
You mentioned about getting into his name. And what I thought was really interesting, when you break down his name, the last name Jamar means great or mighty, and the desire for dominance and power. I think that kind of sums it up for his last name.
Yeah. Well, hey, Cathy, hold on. I've got one more segment here right before the news, if you'll hold on for a second, because one of the things that I think there's a lot of people that are making a mistake right now, and that is they're saying, just wait till January 20th and all this goes away. No, it's not. And we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more straight ahead. The super text line is open, 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. And coming up, Joan Jones in the news. And Joan, what do we have coming up?
Dan, the mosque where the New Orleans ramming suspect worshipped is telling its members to stay quiet. Also, why Chief Justice John Roberts is concerned about the safety of some justices. Those stories coming up at 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
6:57, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Cathy Hinners, our top cop, joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. All right, so Cathy, I think there's this inaccurate perception that once Donald Trump gets into office, this is all going to go away. No, they're here, and it's going to be really hard to stop future attacks. I mean, clearly one of the things that we need to do is, in my opinion, get Kash Patel in there as the head of the FBI and really start focusing on what needs to be focused on. Oh, hold on. Yeah, go ahead, Cathy, go ahead.
They've got to get rid of the agents and things like the woman that said that this wasn't a terrorist attack. We have to define the enemy, and that's okay too. We look at Israel, and they clearly define the enemies. But what I think is really kind of interesting too is last month, December 2024, the Biden administration released a report called the National Strategy on Countering Islamophobia and Arab Hate. And it's 67 pages of what they want Congress to do for the Muslims in America. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that came out the month before this happened, because I'm sure that's, the fear that Islamophobia is going to take over and whatever. But, like I say, we have to understand our enemies. And when you see that we've allowed Hamas to actually parade around and protest in our cities, burning flags and things like that, that's a problem. And I think Trump will be able to stop that. But, man, it's so deep, deeply embedded in America right now.